What's new in ER Studio 19.2? So before we start, let's just do a quick summary of what is ER Studio. So it's a tool for data architects, and those data architects are going to produce models of the information of the organization. And then they're going to use those models to then document and design data assets, such as databases or files. And it's an enterprise tool, meaning we can support many data architects modeling a lot of information and many data assets. We've got an ongoing mission to support all of the different products that hold data and provide these data assets. And then we've got a secondary mission to be able to connect those data architects with other initiatives in the organization that have an interest in data, such as data governance and data analytics. We want to be able to unite those teams and the tools to be able to form a company-wide data ecosystem. So that's our mission. In terms of the products itself, there are three components. We've got our thick client data architect sitting on the desktop of our data modelers and data architects. They can share models within the central team server repository, and from that repository we can publish those models to an internal website to allow a wide number of extended roles like software engineers and database administrators to be able to view the data models produced by those architects. Also within Team Server Core, we've got a built-in business glossary and data catalog that we're going to talk about later to allow data stewards to be able to manage the business glossary and produce a data catalog and to start the process of governing our data. Within ER Studio, we build a model. The model has really sort of three parts to it. So over on the right, for all of our data assets, we produce physical data models. So here we've got a physical data model of a database. So we've got tables, and those tables have columns, and there's relationships between the tables. These models are using technical metadata. So the table is called cust, and a column called C_RTNG. So at this point, we don't have a lot of information about what this data is. We produce logical data models that include a lot of documentation around those physical data models, and that's written in business language. So if we're documenting an existing database, we reverse engineer, create the physical in the tool, and then we build a logical model around it to document it. If we're designing, we start off with the logical model. We use this as a mechanism to agree the requirements of the data assets with stakeholders. And once we've agreed the logical model, we can use the tool to generate the physical and then modify the physical, and then we can generate actual code. The third part of the model is the business glossary. So this is a collection of business terms in business language, the accepted vocabulary of the business. And against each of these terms, we'll have a standard definition. So there is no ambiguity or equivocation around the meaning of information. We can assign business rules to those pieces of information as well. And in our model, we want to be able to connect these parts together. So against an individual column, we want to attach a business term, or against a logical entity or attribute, we want to attach the business term and create a model like this. And ER Studio allows us to do that. In a more enterprise context, those logical and physical models, we can build this enterprise data model here. And it has three levels to it. Down at the bottom, we've got our project models, where we're modeling individual data assets, and we might have a logical and or physical part to that model. We then have at the top two enterprise-wide models, an enterprise conceptual, which have a small number of entities in it, and the standard definitions we want for those. So we can have a general notion of companies and orders. Our enterprise logical model will then have a greater number of entities, a greater amount of detail. We'll probably have our entities fully attributed. We might even have the keys in there, the foreign key relationships between them, and the model might be in third normal form. But this is a company-wide standard logical data model. And we can use this, again, to bring together all of our project models. We can use them as a standard way to drive our designs. If I want to design a new data asset, I can take a subset of the enterprise logical model to drive a new project model, a logical model, use that fragment there, I'll modify that, and then generate the physical, etc. And likewise, if I'm documenting, I'll bring all these together, connect them to the enterprise logical model. And ER Studio has these universal mappings that allows us to connect everything together. So we've got traceability between them. In a bigger context here, we've extended it so we can model databases, and then we've been doing that for a long time with ER Studio. Now we're moving towards file formats as well. So between applications, we might be sending messages, JSON messages, and we can model those messages here. And we've got a hierarchical structures. And version 19.2, I'm going to talk to you about this in a moment, talks about how we can support these hierarchical models in ER Studio. Likewise, we've also got the data warehouse, and we can link everything together to our enterprise logical model. And with this model, this gives us a chance to sort of manage our data across the company, to be able to see like for like. Okay, so I've got an entity here in my enterprise logical model called client. Where are we storing client information? I can see in this particular application database, I've got an entity called customer. Okay, different language, but we've mapped them together. Great. I've got a JSON message flowing between some applications that contains client information. I've got a hub in my Data Vault warehouse here called Hub Client. Okay, also an instance of client data. So if I want to change anything, then this gives me an opportunity to see where those changes will impact. And we can also tie back to our business glossary to allow us to govern our data, understand what are the rules that applies to client data, etc. So that's our overall model, and that's what we're trying to support in ER Studio. So version 19.2, there's obviously two parts to ER Studio, Data Architect and Team Server, and we've made improvements to both of these. On the Data Architect side, the big ticket item here is our support for hierarchical models. And there's really sort of two models that we're supporting initially. MongoDB, we already support in ER Studio in a previous version. We've done a major uplift on Mongo using a lot of these new principles and approach that we're going to look at in a moment. We've also provided new platform support for JSON files, and this includes both JSON instance files and also JSON schema files. For these hierarchical models, we've got a lot of new features I'm going to take you through. We've got some improved visualization of those models, the way that you can edit the models, the generation from logical to physical is all improved. And the principle here is that we want to do all this within the same tool that our data architects use for databases, same tool that they're using for building logical data models. We don't have to change to a different tool or different products using different techniques. We can use the same approach that we use for any data assets with these hierarchical models. So I might want to start from a logical model and then generate the physical from it. And we want to be able to convert from a relational structure to a hierarchical structure. And likewise on the reverse, if I reverse engineer a hierarchical structure, Mongo or JSON, we create a hierarchical physical model, and then it will create for us a relational logical model, and we can then document and connect that to our enterprise data model as we did elsewhere. On the team server side, we've made a lot of improvements to the way we handle data sources. So we've got a new set of user interface elements for the data catalog. Although ER Studio is not intended to be a data governance tool, if you're starting off the process for data governance, you want to build a catalog of data assets, build a business glossary, document those data assets and connect them to the glossary. ER Studio can really help you with that. And then over time, you can upgrade then to a full-blown data governance tool like Calibra, for instance. And with the integrations we delivered in 19.1, you can then synchronize the knowledge inside ER Studio with your Calibra instance and continue the journey. Within Team Server, we've also been making some performance improvements. This is part of an ongoing initiative to increase the performance of the tool across the board. In this release, we've improved the performance for those customers using Oracle as the backend database for Team Server. We mentioned Calibra earlier on. This is really important to us. We're seeing so many of our customers that are using ER Studio alongside Calibra and want the two working together. So again, trying to achieve that company-wide data ecosystem, have our data architects contributing heavily to the data governance program. So we've made a lot of improvements to our Calibra integration, and we're going to continue to do so. So let's go and look at a little demo of some of these features. We do have a more detailed video on both YouTube and our resource center. I'm going to give you a little bit of a taster of some of the new features. So with our new Mongo support, we've done a lot of work to improve the logical to physical generation and vice versa. To give us more control over how our hierarchical structure is going to be handled in the physical and to control the denormalization process, we've included a new property in the logical model. So against each relationship, we can now specify whether the relationship is a containing relationship and the direction of containment. So on this diagram here, we can see that our book contains chapters, chapters contain sections. Our address we've selected to include within the publisher and the library and the patron, so this one's fully denormalized. Our checkout here, we've decided in the model that we're going to contain it within the book, but not within the patron or the library. So containment's only on this relationship here. So that gives us a lot of control when we generate the Mongo. When we do generate the Mongo, then we get a pseudo-hierarchical model that looks like this. So we've got these containment relationships. And we can see here that book contains chapter, chapter contains section. Our checkout is contained in book. And then we've also got these referencing relationships supported by MongoDB. A new thing that we've added is the ability to visualize this model in a different way. So I can now select to roll up my contained objects. And that will give us this rolled up view here. In the rolled up view, or our contains nested objects are shown as a little tree view inside the object. We've also done a lot of work to improve the editing ability. So many of you have told us that you want to be able to edit the physical model directly, very quickly. We've improved the way you can do that. And as you can see, every time I edit the country object with an address, it changes it elsewhere. So reusability is really important in this approach. We also provided support for JSON generation, so I can create a JSON model in the same sort of way. Again, this has created a pseudo-hierarchical model. These referencing relationships are here for documentation. I can remove those or just leave them in. Again, I've got my hierarchical rolled up view. Now in my JSON model, I might then decide that I want one top level object. So I can either modify the logical model and then use our new and improved compare merge facility to propagate those changes, or I can modify the physical model directly. Book contains publisher, library contains patron, library contains book. And there's my JSON model. And then I can either generate the JSON from here, I can preview the JSON within the objects, both JSON instance files, and I can also select JSON schema and see the JSON schema file. So we've also done some good work with our team server product. Many of you have asked us to improve the data catalog capability within ER Studio. So we've got the business glossary, that's great. We want to be able to classify our data models against that business glossary. So we want to be able to create a catalogue of data assets. Now ER Studio Team Server for a while has had a data sources tab which allows you to catalogue all those data assets. We've really improved the UI of that and made it more business friendly. So if you're starting to think about a data governance project, the first thing you want to do is build a catalogue of all your data assets. Against those data assets, we then want to be able to build physical data models, so we'll be able to reverse engineer and capture the technical metadata. We'll then build logical models against those, and we may also map to business terms. So let's have a look at the new catalog feature. So Team Server now, we've got a new tab. We've renamed data sources to data catalog, and the main view is this Explorer view. So the objects that you're going to see in here, we're going to see groups of data sources, and here I've got production servers, dev test servers. In my production servers, I've got all my SQL Server databases. So inside the groups, we then have our data sources, and we can provide a name and a definition and custom properties of these. We can then drill down to individual data assets in that data source. So on this particular SQL Server instance, I've got 4 different databases. And I've got a data asset called trng_db, and I can provide a definition for that. Once we've connected the data asset to a physical data model in ER Studio, then we can see all of the tables within that physical data asset. Now you'll notice here we've got a little switch that says display the tables and columns using their logical names or their physical names. So here we're displaying the logical names. So if I click on employee, then I can see the data model that it's part of. I can see its logical name and its physical name, the definition, and any business terms that's related to it. So we've got a very sort of simplified set of information for the data asset, for the tables. So it's really sort of aimed at the business audience. You can then open that object up and go to the standard page that tells you all about that particular table or data asset. Likewise, you can click on the business term and go straight to the business term. Within the table, then you can see all the columns within that table, again, using the logical names. And if we've mapped to business terms, then it'll show that in the model. We've also included support for various other data asset types. So, for instance, down here, I can see I've got a set of APIs. I've got a library manager API, and within getBooks, which is a method in my library manager API, I've attached this data asset to a physical model representing a JSON schema. And I can drill down through that JSON schema and see all the different fields within it. And this is obviously a hierarchical model. So the sort of process you've asked us to deliver is one group of users can go through registering new data groups, data sources, data assets, and attaching useful business metadata to those assets. And then you'll go through deciding which of these assets are important. You'll then reverse engineer and create physical and logical data models in Data Architect and map those to business terms, and then attach those models to the data assets in this view here, so that we can then browse a well laid out data catalog. So we've done a lot of work on our Calibra integration. Many of you are using this integration. It's very, very popular, and you're all coming up with new features and finding edge case bugs for us. Some of the new features that we've added in support for attachments. So inside Data Architects, inside your data dictionaries, you can create attachments and bind those to attributes, columns, tables, and entities. We've brought those attachments into the Calibra property set, so you can map those to Calibra custom properties. We've also allow you now to publish the relationships between entities and tables to Calibra. So if you've published a physical model and a logical model to Calibra, and in RStudio there's relationships between them, one is perhaps generated from the other, then those relationships will go across to Calibra. Some little things like the data type property in Team Server, and we have a composite data type, which was the only property to map to Calibra. We've broken that down into the atomic, so you can map the scale and the width and the data type itself to Calibra. And there's various other bug fixes that we've done as well. Just to quickly show you some of those. So the property mapping section, if I scroll down, we can see various atomics. So we've now got data type, we've got scale, and if I select this string type property in Calibra, you can see various text-based properties from my enterprise data dictionary. I've got two properties there, data policies and data stewards, which I could map to Calibra properties. And the default is only enterprise data dictionaries can be mapped, but there's a little checkbox there if you want to include your local data dictionaries as well. For the relationship between entity and table, if I just show you that. So we go to a logical data model, find an entity. Let's find our employee entity in this model. Our Where Used tab in RStudio shows us the mapping of the logical entity to the two physical tables. We can also see this in related objects here graphically. There's our two physical tables. Now, if I open this in Calibra, scroll down, I can see, because I've already checked in these physical models into Calibra, represents table. So there's the mappings from the logical entity in Calibra to the physical two tables. So to summarize, in Data Architect, we provided brand new support for hierarchical models with new visualization capabilities. And within that group, we've provided improved support for MongoDB and brand new support for JSON files covering instance files and JSON schema. On the Team Server side of things, we've got our new and improved data catalog view, a business-friendly view of our data assets grouped into categories. We've improved the performance of Team Server with Oracle as a back-end database, and we've done a bunch of work around our Calibra integration. So that's what's new in RStudio 19.2. Thanks for watching. For more information, send us an email at sales@idera.com. Thanks.